Hi everyone, Grandmaster Ben Finegold here with our video of the day. We're going to go back in time a little bit and look at a game that I played in Las Vegas in the National Open in 2009. This was in round 3. This was the last National Open I played in before I started working at the chess club in St. Louis. This was against Jonathan Hilton, who is not only a good chess player, but he's also an author. Wrote a book on Grandmaster Alex Wojciech, passed away a few years ago. And Jonathan's in his early 20s, I believe, and maybe he was only 19 or 20 when this game was played, although I'm guessing all of this. So this was actually one of my most interesting games, and actually there was a funny point in the game where I was questioning whether I'd analyzed something right or not. Okay, so I have black. Jonathan's rating is 2220. I think that's his FIDE rating. And we transpose it to an English, and I very rarely play the hedgehog, but I decided to play it this game. So we got an interesting position where I wasn't really big on theory, but you get a position where it's hard for a lower-rated player to draw because it's not very symmetrical. Now, the normal hedgehog is e6, and I've done that too, but I like to play g6, the double fianchetto. And these moves, white can play bishop e3 or bishop g5. White could castle quickly. Okay, but anyway, we got sort of a standard kind of position here. White's a little better because he has more space and really good control of d5, but black has all of his pieces out. He's castled. He doesn't have a lot of weaknesses, and he has something to play for. He can hit this c4 pawn by playing knight e5 and rook c8, and his knight also has the good c5 square, and black has a nice solid position. I think most grandmasters would prefer white here because white has more space, better control of the center, and just sort of a bind on the position. Okay, but when you're paired down in Swiss tournament, you don't want to get boring equality and have your opponent draw the game without difficulties. So having these kinds of positions where a decisive result is more likely is usually a good idea when you're paired down. Okay, rook c8, rook ac1, played a6. Typical hedgehog move, controlling the b5 square. Now none of his pieces can use b5, and I can play b5 later, maybe. Okay, rook fd1, and I played rook e8. Sort of a general purpose move. Sometimes you want to play e6 and d5, and you want your rook on e8. Sometimes you just want your e-pawn defended when they play knight d5. And sometimes you want to play knight f8, knight e6, or bishop f8 in some positions. And it's sort of a waiting move. Rook e8 doesn't really do anything. Okay, now this is where the game got interesting. My opponent made a move which is good considering that we both want to win, but unfortunately for me, the computer recommends it. Played b4. b4 is very dangerous for both sides in this opening because white's gaining space and black doesn't want to get smushed, but c4 is now much weaker. He can never play b3 and defend his c-pawn. So, of course, knight e5, attacking the pawn right away. And white has a couple of ways to defend his pawn. He wants to use his rook. That's why he played rook c1. So moving his knight anywhere defends his pawn. In fact, the top 3 computer moves are white moving his knight to some square so that his rook would defend his c-pawn. And it turns out the computer really prefers knight a4, trying to put pressure on my b6 pawn. Later playing bishop e3 and attacking that way. Instead, my opponent played the move that looks the most logical, knight to d5. And the reason the computer doesn't like that as much as knight a4 is that it lets black trade a lot of pieces. And when black trades a lot of pieces, the space advantage for white isn't so dangerous. And the reason black can trade a lot of pieces is I played the correct e6. Now again, it still likes white, but just not as much as if white had played knight a4. Now the engine wants everything to be traded on f6, and it still prefers white because white has more space. Well, my opponent realized that the more trades, the easier it is to play black because black has sort of a lack of space. Almost everything black has is on the first 3 rows. So he made a mistake here. It's actually a tactical mistake. If he just takes on f6, he'll have the advantage. He played knight to e3. And knight e3 actually almost loses the game. I wouldn't say it loses, but it's close. And the reason knight e3 is bad tactically is it blocks the coordination between the queen and bishop. And one thing I tell all of my students is to look at all the pieces on the board and see which ones are and are not defended. In this position, before he played knight e3, every piece I click on is defended by something. Doesn't matter what I click on, it's defended. In fact, it's very strange and unusual, all of his pawns are also defended. And that means if I take anything, he can take back. And it's funny, the first move he makes where he undefends something takes all of his advantage away and gives the advantage to black. And when I played this move, which is a very tactical knight takes e4, typical move in a lot of openings where you're attacking everything by discovery, I was like, wow, that move's great and I'm winning. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute, that move's terrible. And I kept changing my mind because the tactics are very difficult to calculate. And my opponent thought, I believe, about 40 minutes here. Okay? And it's not really a position you should think 40 minutes because you have one move. And if you don't play it, you're losing. Either you take my queen or you don't. If you don't take my queen, you'll be down a pawn and I'll have the two bishops. That's just completely losing. There's really no other move than taking my queen. Well, he was analyzing further. Okay, so he took my queen, I took his queen. So if nothing happens, I'm a pawn up and I have a great position. Unfortunately, my knight's trapped, so I got to watch my step. Now, the reason bishop takes b6, the obvious move, doesn't work is because of another piece that's not defended. This is actually quite funny. The knight on e3 is not defended, so I have the move bishop h6, which is incredibly strong because I'm attacking his knight. If he defends his knight somehow, and he has more than one way to defend his knight, he could move this knight out of the way, so it's defended, or he could play king f2. In any case, I'll take the knight, and then the c4 pawn is insufficiently defended. I have it attacked 3 times. In this position, white has the c4 pawn defended 3 times. Of course, if I remove one of his defenders, then it doesn't. And if I take his knight and then take his pawn on c4, I'm up 2 pawns. I'll take in the pawn on e4, and then take in the pawn on c4. Okay, and he took my pawn on b6, so I'd actually only be 1 pawn up, but I would be winning because I'd have 2 center pawns to 0. And so that's not good when your center pawns all disappear. Okay, now, unfortunately, one of the reasons I was getting nervous when I played knight takes e4 before he took my queen is I realized he could save his bishop and stop bishop h6. And that move, of course, is bishop g5. And that's what he played. And that's the best move. And now, my knight on d2 is trapped. So I don't think I saw bishop g5 when I played knight takes e4. I don't think I did. Okay, luckily I can keep attacking his bishop, so h6, and doesn't matter where his bishop goes, either way I have lots of tricks. So for example, if he plays bishop h4, I can play knight on e5 takes c4, threatening his knight, and the point is the bishop on g5 is not defending his knight on e3, so all of his knights are undefended. So for example, knight takes c4, bishop takes d4 check is just easily winning. I'm up, what, 2 pawns? Yeah. And if he plays rook takes c4, which the computer says is best, and then rook takes c4, knight takes c4, bishop takes d4 check, king h1, this is all computer analysis, but we're just taking things every move. Okay, and here, black is also up 2 pawns, but it's not so easy to win, because if I play b5 or d5, he can get one of his pawns back with opposite colored bishops, okay, which is actually what the computer says we should do. And black has an advantage because black's still a pawn up. So it's good for black. Okay, so instead of bishop h4, which is what we just analyzed, he played bishop f4, which is another move. Okay, and once again, black has some moves at his disposal. We can play the same way by playing knight e4. I'm sorry, knight c4, excuse me. And one of the ideas is to play e5 later. And in fact, that's the move that the engine likes and says black is close to winning. Okay, but I didn't do that. I played the move g5. Okay, and that's not a good move according to the engine. And when I say it's not a good move, now the computer says that white is equal. And it says after knight takes c4, black has a close to winning advantage because his pieces are all jumbled up here, and I'm going to fork them, and I'll end up with the two bishops. My bishops are pretty nice, and my rooks will be on open lines. It'll be great. And I'll just show you a sample line. Bishop takes c4, e5, and the computer says basically every move is the same. He could play knight f5, could play bishop e5, could play rook d2, and in all cases it says that black is up 1.5. So for example, let's say he takes on d2 because it's nice to be up a lot of pieces. He takes f4. White is still up a piece, but he has some issues. Issue is I'm going to play d5, and you're going to lose your piece back. And you can't play knight d5 because I just take it. Your bishop's pinned. So I have to sacrifice a piece or two, then get it back, and then I have a winning position. But I didn't see all of that. So I want to say simple, but it's not really simple. I played the simple g5, attacking his bishop. And now, if he plays bishop to g3, which he didn't do, but that's an interesting move, now I play knight takes c4 as we keep analyzing. And again, I'm threatening bishop takes knight. So he plays rook takes c4, defending. Rook takes c4 is the best move. Knight takes c4, and bishop takes d4 check, king h1, and this is looking very similar to the line that I showed you before I played the move g5. We've basically inserted g5, bishop g3. And once again, black has a nice advantage because black is up a pawn or two, and white is struggling to draw. Okay, now instead of playing bishop g3, the line we just looked at, white played bishop takes e5, which is a good move, and I took with the pawn. And again, I'm up a pawn here, and I have two bishops, but my knight is trapped. So if I lose my knight, I'm losing. If I don't lose my knight, I'm winning. Okay, and now he blundered, made the losing move. The correct move is knight takes e6, getting his pawn back. And irrespective of which way I take his knight, then he takes my knight. Material is equal. I thought I had the advantage, but the computer says it's equal. Computer doesn't agree with me. Okay. I thought since I had two bishops, I would be better, but computer says, now you got nothing. So knight takes e6 gives an equal position according to the engine. Material would be equal after, for example, rook takes, rook takes. And I assumed if I attacked on the queen side with bishop f8 and a5, I would be better, and the computer says you got nothing. So, man, computer's tough. Okay, so instead of knight takes e6, acquiescing to material equality, he played for the win, or as I like to say, for the loss. He played knight to c2, saving his knight, and now it looks like my knight is trapped, because my knight is trapped. Okay, very interesting game. Unfortunately for him, I can defend my knight, and he can't attack it. And I have an extra pawn, and I have the two bishops, and I have a huge pawn majority on the king side, which soon gets rolling. Now the computer says that white's winning. I'm sorry, that black's winning. I know what color I am. Okay, he played knight to e1. I assume he wants to play something like rook c2 and attack my knight. I played e4, attacking on f3. And he played rook c2, as I said. The other reason with e4 is it opens up the line for my bishop. So obviously I want to play bishop d4, which would pin his knight to his king. And even though I obviously want to play that, that's not easy to stop. In fact, the computer recommends king h1 here, which isn't a good move when you're trying to win my knight. Okay, so he played rook c2. I played bishop to d4. Obviously, you can't let me play bishop takes knight check. That would be quite bad for white. So he played the only move that makes any sense, king f2. And now, you can pause your video here if you want. Black has a move that really wins. Otherwise, black is just much better. So you have one move that wins instantly, and you have one move where you're much better. Or maybe more than one move. Okay, so what's the winning move for black, and the game is over. The game only lasted 3 more moves, although he could have resigned earlier. Pause your video. What's the winning move? Okay, the answer is f5 with the unstoppable threat of f4. And the funny line, which actually happened in the game, well, you can't let me play f4, but you can't stop it. You can take a piece, and now if you play f4, my bishop's hanging. So instead, So instead, after rook takes, I play bishop takes e3 check, and then f4 check, and the pawns just keep rolling. It's amazing. King f2, e3 check. What an amazing finish, but unstoppable. And here, I announced that it was connect 4, so he had to resign. So that was one of the most interesting games I played in 2009 against Jonathan Hilton, a chess master and an author. And very interesting hedge hog where my pawn majority on the king side really got strong. Please follow me on Twitter and Facebook, CCSCA, the Chess Club and Scholastic Center of Atlanta. Like and subscribe, and please consider a donation at atlchessclub.com. Thanks, everyone. Bye.